Hello and welcome back to the only show that knows about Middle Earth but wonders about Upper Earth and Lower Earth. I'm Max.
I'm Matt.
I'm Luke.
And this is Force for Thought.
No, it's more for thought.
I was waiting for someone to correct me.
I'm sorry.
You do it
I
every
actually
time.
forgot.
I put an
I was
emphasis on
stressed.
Force.
I'm too stressed about it being our first remote episode. There's too much that's different. Starting with an extra more for thought instead of a normal Force for thought is just stress on stress. It's
Yeah, we were messed up.
Working out the kinks.
Honestly,
We'll
thank
get-
God though. Thank God Skeleton Crew isn't on right now or something, or we'd be dead.
Hey, December 3rd. We got that release date.
December 3rd. No longer November. So weird that they decided to be like, no, that's not. We're gonna push it back by a full month now.
Book of Boba Fett
Which
came
feels
out like December 31st or something, or maybe January 1st.
yeah. But wasn't it supposed to be November 20th, like around Thanksgiving time originally for Skeleton Crew?
I mean, what do you mean by originally? It was supposed to be like 2022.
That's a good point. Most of the time we talk about things that we're like, oh, don't trust Star Wars. They're going to kind of break your heart. And here I am being like, yeah, they told us originally November 22nd or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not too bothered about that. I think we're close enough, and I've seen enough of a trailer that I do think the show exists, which is my
That's true.
bar for excitement.
We are getting
But
something.
If nothing else, ChatGPT will tell you the exact same thing. So.
As much as we like talking about Star Wars, we are here to talk about more than Star Wars. It's our More for Thought segment, and we're here talking about
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings. I wanted to do a Lord of the Rings More for Thought for a long time because I really like Lord of the Rings, and I just recently rewatched the whole trilogy. And so then I really lit a fire under you guys, like, folks, we got to start doing this Lord of the Rings More for Thought because it's so
Yeah.
good. It's so related to Star Wars because it's like a fantasy series. I mean, the prequels are obviously more tied to it in my head because they came out in the same time period. But
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings is also like a fantasy series, also in that like nerd pop culture subset of society, for better or worse. And people think so highly of Lord of the Rings and so much worse on Star Wars. Sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not. But it just always aggravates me. And I want to give Lord of the Rings its fair time of the day because it is fantastic. You guys, what's your guys' relationship to Lord of the Rings coming in?
Yeah, I agree. It is one of the few things that I would unironically call a masterpiece, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like you said, everyone holds it in very high regard, so that's not an unpopular opinion. I will say I like Star Wars more, but I do think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is a better trilogy than any of the Star Wars trilogies.
I agree with that. I think we've talked about this before, and Matt disagreed.
We did.
Because
I do,
you don't
yeah.
like how tonally consistent the Lord of the Rings trilogy is, which is crazy to me because that's like exactly what I look for in a
Correct.
trilogy. And I never considered the fact that it could be better if each movie had its own unique identity more and still formed a cohesive trilogy, which there is
You know,
stock
it's-
in that. And that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast because it happens so rarely with my type of arrogance that I hear someone disagree with me and then explain why, and I actually understand why, even if I don't agree with it.
Mhm.
And that's an exciting sensation to have.
That's good for you. Do you guys read the books or anything as well? Like talking about relationship wise?
No,
not a
I
nerd.
haven't read any of the books. I've
I'm
seen
just-
the Hobbit movies, which I don't like nearly as much, and I did
No,
just
you-
finish the
No,
most
you being there with you, you did not watch the Hobbit movies.
because that was like one of the last
You were
things that
present.
we saw at the actual midnight premiere, so I kept falling asleep. But yeah, I did not enjoy the
No,
Hobbit
we
as
didn't just
much.
see it at the midnight premiere. I remember at least for Desolation of Smaug, we saw a double feature with the Unexpected Journey and Desolation of Smaug.
We
and it was
yes, we did. Yeah,
2-3 hour movies. And I remember
that was too much. Yeah,
that was a tough
That's
one.
the-
The
that's-
fact I thought I could,
And
stay awake
especially-
is unremarkable.
I think Unexpected Journey is actually really good. And then the problem is when you watch a double feature of those movies, you just realize how bad Desolation of Smaug is.
No, Desolation of Smaug was excellent. That's my favorite one of the Hobbit trilogy.
Oh, that's crazy.
I like the Unexpected Journey, and I don't really like Battle of the Five Armies.
No
But
one
yeah,
does.
Desolation of
Doesn't make
Smaug
any
was so
sense.
much fun. That movie's rad. That's exactly what I want. It was so much more action, and the dwarves got characterized more, if
Yeah.
at all. We'll talk about The Hobbit more
So-
specifically later. I wanted to talk about a few things for Lord of the Rings first. made a bit of a
Real
structure.
quick, I gotta go. I have to just give my relationship with Lord of the Rings.
I'm
as
sorry, I
well.
never did.
No, you're fine. And I would gladly gloss over this. Besides the fact that I think Lord of the Rings are very well made, and I like them as on a technical standpoint, but I don't love Lord of the Rings. I've never.
Oh no.
I don't know what it is. I like it. I love Helm's Deep. I love the battles. I like it, but I don't know. It never tickled my fancy. It's never something I never wanted to go to Middle Earth, like and revisit. I like revisiting those movies. I think they are masterpieces, like Max said. They just there's no way around them. They're so well made. They're so well acted. They're so good. But there's just something about it that I'm just like, can we just get over the Smeagol stuff? I'm really the Gollum stuff. I'm just like, let's get going. And then the way I look at these three movies is the one I like, which is Fellowship. Then there's the boring one with the Battles of Helm's Deep, which is Two Towers, and then there's the sad one. And I was like, well, to me, it never gets better than Fellowship, because like in Star Wars, for me, I like when they're all together, and it's like that fun start to the journey, and the stakes aren't super super high, and then at the end of it, it's just like, God, it is like so sad. You see this whole journey, and Frodo's like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna go die now, and it's like, man, it really is so sad every time I watch it. It's just like, it's beautiful, but it's like so sad that, yeah, I much prefer Star Wars. Obviously, I love Star Wars. I like Lord of the Rings, and I love Harry Potter. And I feel like there's a bunch of other IP, but that's not the shit on Lord of the Rings at all, because it is great. That's just the other perspective.
I
I'm
would say
glad
it.
that-
I would
honestly,
say I love it.
I-
I think it is fantastic. I think hearing you say
I know.
the boring one with Helm's Deep blew my mind, because I'm like, you're not wrong. Like, the second one is, in my opinion, the
I know.
least of the three, but Helm's Deep
Yeah.
single-handedly does bring it back. So I'm like, you can't say the boring one
That's-
with Helm's Deep.
That's why I said. Well, that's why I said the
you
boring
can
one was
say
Helm's
the
Deep,
boring
because
one
it is
with
up
the
until that point.
Ents, or the boring one with Smeagol, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, I get that. But the boring one with Helm's Deep, I'm like, no, Helm's Deep saves that.
No,
entire
but I
movie.
can't say. I know I can't say the boring one with Smeagol though, because it's like that is the part of the boring part. The unboring part is Helm's Deep, so it's like, oh yeah, like you don't mention you have to mention Helm's Deep, and you mention Two Towers,
You didn't
because that gets
mention-
you excited about it.
You didn't mean to say that Helm's Deep is boring. You meant the boring movie and then Helm's Deep. Like that's the part
Correct.
that is
Exactly.
noteworthy. Okay.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. I guess it just kind of broke my mind hearing those so close together in the same sentence.
I don't agree, but I see where you're coming from. It's so hard for me to even think about like which of the three movies is my favorite, because they're all so tonally consistent and cohesive as in terms of plot and everything, that it's like
Mhm.
picking your favorite third of a single movie. It's like I don't know, they all go together. Like
That should be easy for you though, Luke, since you watch basically movies in thirds.
I wish I could stay awake for a whole third. I watch movies in ninths. All right, so what is everyone's favorite character? I'm excited to talk about this part because you guys have bonded over your favorite Lord of the Rings character before. You've mentioned it on the podcast before, and I waited
Yeah.
until a better time to really get into it. But who's your favorite character?
Oh no, no,
I mean,
now
the
I'm
thing is-
afraid I'm gonna not say the same one.
You are gonna say the same one. It's not. Here's the thing though. It's not actually the best character, but it's my favorite character. And it's Boromir.
Yes, that's who I was gonna say as
But-
well.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we talked about, Max, in college as well, was how our love for Boromir. And then after, see, that's what I'm saying. Fellowship is just the best one, because once he's out, I'm out. I'm like, he's just Ned Stark's again.
Yeah,
The
if you're
OG
only there
Ned
for
Stark.
Boromir, then that's
Not-
definitely your favorite one.
Not
No,
if you watch the extended
mean,
editions. In the
I-
extended editions, he has quite a bit of content in the Two Towers as well. Because I remember the first time that I watched the extended editions, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Boromir's in this movie now."
Quite a
Bring
bit
it
is
back
a
up.
generous term. He is
Well,
in
more
the
than
out of-
two
out of-
he's not
scenes.
in it at all in the original.
Yeah, I know.
Out of 5 hours. Out of 5 hours, he's in it for what? 2 minutes?
But anyways,
But
I'm
Boromir-
stepping on your toes, Matt. You talk about Boromir.
No, I like Boromir. I in the world of he is the Samwise to oh my god, I'm blanking on every character's name right now.
to Aragorn.
Aragon's. Yeah, he is the Samwise to Aragon, I think. He is the redheaded stepchild.
I mean, Samwise is a better example, is another example of a better character than Boromir. But it's not just that, like, all the
yeah.
characters in Lord of the Rings are great, and I'm not that surprised that we have different favorites, because I mean, I can't imagine anyone saying a character and I'm like, oh, I mean, if they say like maybe Grima Wormtongue, I'm like, ugh, why? But all the characters are great. But just to pick Boromir, like the seventh coolest member of the Fellowship. He's the worst of the men because there's only two. He's the
Well.
second coolest son of Denethor. Like, he gets replaced in the second and third movies, and Faramir is better and cooler.
Yeah, Faramir
It's
is
crazy
awesome.
to me that you guys like Boromir so much more.
I think, but he's also not Sean Bean. I feel like when you're watching Fellowship for the first time, you're like, that's the character I want to know more about. Which is exactly why I guarantee they cast him in Game of Thrones, because they're like, let's do the same thing.
Get
Let's,
people
you want to know
show
about
up.
that guy.
Is Sean
Yeah, and
Bean
then you
that
kill
much
him
of a
off.
crowd pleaser? I mean, I don't dislike him.
You saw a golden eye.
Yeah?
I think so much of it for me is the fact that he was such like an understated character, that they did such a good job of giving him an entire character arc in one movie, that his story didn't
Yeah.
overstay its welcome. Like when we talk about the Two Towers,
Yes.
we'll probably talk a little bit about Merry and Pippin's story and how like that kind of starts to get a little boring, and then we'll talk about Frodo and Sam,
Yes.
and that kind of starts to get a little bit boring. Boromir didn't overstay his welcome. He was in it. He had a great story arc. He died like a hero, one of the coolest deaths in all of cinema, I think, at the end of the first movie.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say something else about it too, but I forget now. I don't know. I think he's a really cool character. Now, if you were to ask me, like as a kid, which one of the Fellowship do I want to play as when I'm running around outside, I'd say Legolas. I think everyone would say Legolas,
Well,
right? He's like 12-year-old us favorite answer. That's the answer, right? Legolas is the coolest character. Like, if you're gonna play as somebody.
See, I think I like Boromir. That was always my. If you're running on the yard playing, I think because I was like, I feel cranky and old already.
All right,
But
you
that
go
is
be
the correct
Boromir. Oh,
answer.
you're dead. All right, let's all go play. That sounds fun playing with you.
See, that was my goal. I was like, can we just play Star Wars again? Sorry, Luke, who's your favorite character though, as well?
I mean, Aragon. It's got to be Aragon,
Mhm.
right? Maybe
is
Sam,
great.
maybe Sam, but yeah, probably Aragon. And I won't even get into that much detail. I mean, he's so cool. The way he opens those two doors in Rohan to come back is one of the
Yep.
most amazing sequences.
Just satisfying as hell.
Yeah, I remember I made my wife watch Lord of the Rings with me, which is a tough thing to do because like they're long. A couple years later, like years after she watched Lord of the Rings, she saw Liv Tyler in something, and she was like, "Oh," or we were talking about Liv Tyler. I forget what it was. But I said she's Aragorn's girlfriend in Lord of the Rings, and I forget who I was with, but they were like, that's like the 12th most interesting part in Lord of the Rings. Why are you even talking about that? And I was like, no, that's my wife's favorite part. She wants to fast forward through the battle scenes to get to more Aragon and Eowyn. Oh my god, I'm blanking on her name. Arwen. Get some more Aragon and Arwen scenes. And it's like, that's crazy to me because those
That's really
scenes are so much worse in my mind. But everyone likes something different, and Lord of the Rings has something for everyone, despite what they say. Except for people of color, if you're into that. Doesn't have any non-whites.
Not a. That's the new show though. Rings of Power.
I think there's
Yeah.
very little in the Lord of the Rings that dates it, but one of it is in like all of the artwork for them, how prevalent Liv Tyler is in all of the pictures and promos and everything, and then you watch the movies and she's in it for like a collective 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say the thing that dates it is when they like the Gravity Games esque skateboarding.
That's the
Scenes.
second one. Yes, that's another one. We've talked about that
Yeah.
before.
We have, and I
It
don't
is
see
gr-
why
I
that
mean-
dates it. That's rad.
It is. It is.
It is rad, but that is something from 2002. Like that is something where everyone is going to the Gravity Games and wants to wear like Birdhouse, Tony Hawk shirts.
Is skateboarding not cool anymore?
It's cool,
When's
it's
the last
just
Tony
not
Hawk
as-
game to come out? That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean those aren't popular. I guess. Yeah, and those were definitely in their A-day in the early 2000s. What's your guys' favorite battle? That's always a fun one to talk about because it's either Helm's Deep or Pelennor Fields, but each one has something
Oof.
unique to love. Unless you guys like something else.
What's,
No, I think it
what's
is.
Pelennor
I think
Fields?
Helm's Deep is legitimately one of the best battles in all of cinema. Too.
Yeah.
I mean, like again, it is great. I mean, right, just left and right. I mean, it is a masterpiece, and so I think every single battle is done so well, which is why I think I also like The Hobbit. Again, not to go down that rabbit hole, but The Hobbit is so underwhelming because when you have a masterpiece, how do you recreate that magic? And I think it's kind of the same thing. With that being said, hot take, and we can talk about this later, is I think I like Forbidden Journey the best out of all the movies, just because I like Bilbo better than Frodo.
An Unexpected Journey is the first Hobbit movie.
Yeah, that's what I said, isn't it?
You said Forbidden, but I don't mean to harp. Sorry, I just didn't want to.
Oh, you know why? Forbidden Journey is the Harry Potter ride in Universal, which I'm a bigger fan of.
I just recently watched Unexpected Journey, and it was a lot worse than I remember. It's a lot of setup. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of setup, but
But they're singing.
oh, I do like the singing part.
The
That's
song,
right.
the song is good.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I do like that. Luke, what's Pelennor Fields? Is that outside Gondor?
Yeah, outside Minas Tirith.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's definitely one of the best battles. Obviously, Helm's Deep too, like we kind of already talked about. But also a sleeper pick for me that I hold in very high esteem is also the battle in Moria when they're backed into that tomb. Because as I
Oh
was
yeah,
preparing for this, I was kind of like thinking over the trilogy and everything. And the third movie is just so great in my opinion because the entire thing is just one huge war movie. Like it's just nonstop
Mhm.
action. And I'm thinking about the first movie and how relatively little action there is because there's no army
Yeah.
in the Fellowship of the Ring. There's a huge army battle in Helm's Deep and the entire Return of the King, but they don't do that with the first one. But they still do a great job of making it feel like there's like a huge battle going on, even though there's only realistically 5 people who are fighting and 4 hobbits running around. And they don't like spell it out, like they don't beat you over the head with it, but they do a good job of making it feel realistic by backing the team into that small room and then closing it off with that door and then having to kind of hold them at bay. It makes the whole thing feel very grounded, and I feel like a lesser movie, like if it was made nowadays, would just like have these heroes encounter an army of orcs and they just kill them all because they're all badass and none of them can die, and it just shows like, oh, how great of
Yeah.
warriors all of them are, and it's just not realistic. And I feel like they did a really good job with that, specifically in Moria.
Not to take the wind out of your sails, but we shouldn't forget the end of Fellowship of the Ring when an army does approach the Fellowship and they all fight him off. Boromir does die, but there's not 2 armies clashing at each other, but there is an army in the Fellowship of the Ring that shows up.
You're right, and I think
Boromir
I think
takes
it's one of
every
the
single
coolest,
arrow.
I think it's one of the coolest scenes when Aragorn turns the corner and is confronted with that entire army. But it is also one of the least realistic things because like they kind of cut away shortly after that, and you're just like, how is he doing? Like that's not
I
gonna go
know.
well. But everything else, like they still kind of do a good job with, because like the hobbits are literally just running the entire time. Like they're not trying to
Mhm.
like take them on themselves or anything like that. So I agree with you, but I hold the battle at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring as probably my least favorite of all of them.
It would be my least favorite if the music. I mean, I guess the music's so good in all of them. I really like that scene also when Aragorn turns the corner, and I just recently rewatched it, and it doesn't cut away right away. Like a couple of them approach him, and then he funnels them into like a corner on some stairs where they can have to go up the stairs like almost one at a time. But like if you really wanted to, you could fit 3 or 4 abreast there to really get after him. But then it cuts.
But Boromir's death
I
saves it.
I thought, yeah, absolutely. I thought your sleeper pick was going to be the battle at Weathertop is also worth talking about, where it's Aragon versus all of the ring wraiths at night.
Mhm.
That is such a captivating scene. Using fire
Any nighttime,
is such a
yeah.
cool idea. That should
any
be
nighttime
way
battle
more of a
scenes are
weapon.
great.
Mm-hmm. And
And it's so mysterious at that point too. You don't know anything about these Nazgul or like how they work or who they are or anything at that point, really.
yeah,
It's
not that you ever really
scary
learn
as much
more.
as it is like good combat. It's terrifying.
No, it's pretty good combat too. It was awesome. I love that
I'm not
scene.
saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's also terrifying.
Yeah. All right. What about favorite performance? Because I think that is one of the things that really sets Lord of the Rings apart from Star Wars is the acting. Like with the
Yeah, it's
exception
great.
of a few performances in the sequels and like Ewan McGregor in the prequels, the acting in Star Wars is not that noteworthy almost ever. And the I guess I included the sequels, so I should include all of the Disney era Star Wars. Almost all of it is well
Yeah.
acted. Well, The Mandalorian,
But not to
and,
but to this
and-
degree
or-
though is
but yeah,
crazy.
not,
When you
not
have
to this
Christopher
degree.
Lee, when you have Ian McKellen, I mean those are theater trained actors, and obviously you have Peter Cushing and stuff in Star Wars, and that stuff is amazing. But I think with Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson just knew what he was doing so much that it was just like, we're gonna only make a fantasy movie. We're gonna make the best fantasy movie because we're gonna combine all these different elements. And I think acting was at the top of that, especially at the time when you're thinking about the late '90s, early 2000s. I think that was like very unheard of
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at like big action movies like that. And so I feel I guess maybe Braveheart is like the only kind of similar thing maybe that's coming to mind. But like that's a great question for acting because again, Boromir would I don't think be even as cool if it wasn't like Sean Bean or somebody that you could really latch onto. But again, that's just again I feel like I shat on Lord of the Rings in the beginning of this, and so I'm recovering here.
I know you like it. It's not just that the performances are great. It's that the performances are great, and this fantasy wizard movie has no business being so technically well performed.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
obviously, it's been
I
20
think-
years now, and so we just kind of take it for granted. But I would have loved to have been older when it came out and been like a Lord of the Rings fan, like had read the books and watched the movie and been like, that was actually amazing, like as a movie, not just
Yeah.
as a Lord of the Rings, like what I wanted brought to life from the
Exactly.
page.
I mean, I think it is for me. It's Ian McKellen as Gandalf, right? I mean, like he is the most iconic character and the second best wizard in my mind. But like just the absolute best. Again, I'm very much Gandalf the Grey, but I think Ian McKellen takes the cake for me. With that being said, Sean Astin is amazing as Sam because
I was gonna
to
say
be
Sean
able to
Astin.
be right, to be able to be Mikey from Goonies, to be able to be who was he? He's like in Waterboy or something, like to be in these like stupid like, comedic roles, to being a child actor, and then to be able to flip the script and be Sam Wise and be known for all of these separately and not just be typecast as something is a crazy feat. And that's saying a lot when you have somebody like Elijah Wood as Frodo too.
I also feel like Samwise got the brunt of the folksy dialogue, like
Oh
it's probably lifted directly from the books that made it so otherworldly. Like everyone
and
has
we
it
get
a
boil him,
bit.
mash him, stick him in a stew.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Anybody remember that albino black sheep video, the song?
No.
Mm-mm.
Was that
Before anybody's
was that the
time?
early days of
All right.
YouTube?
It was pre-YouTube, albino black sheep and like Jib Jab when those were like the main sites you would go to in like 2003, 2004.
That's interesting.
Before Jib Jab was like a weird, they were like the YouTube video plays. Anyway,
Well, I had to Google my guy real quick because I didn't know his name. But Bernard Hill, the actor who plays Theoden,
Theoden. Yeah.
I would put him very high up there. I think I probably just have a soft spot for people who die. It's an easy way to tug at your emotional strings. But he also does an incredible job of going from this, decrepit, cursed king, obviously, and then he gets healed, and then you find out more about his relationship with his daughter, and all that's very captivating. But every
His-
time he makes a speech, it makes you want to run through a wall. If I were ever going
Yeah.
into combat in real life, I think I would watch one of his scenes in The Lord of the Rings, because every time I'm like, okay, I feel like I can die now in real life too. Like I'm at peace with it. When they're at Helm's Deep and they're
Could you imagine?
They're backed up into the keep, and he's given that speech about the horn of Helmer Hand shall sound in the deep one last time. Like that makes me want to run through a wall. And then obviously the Ride of the Rohirrim when he's giving the whole speech, and not realizing at first when I was younger that what they were all shouting was death. I thought they were just like shouting. But as I
Yeah,
got
me
older
too.
and I started watching things with subtitles because I'm deaf now, I saw that they were all yelling death. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, yes, I understand. Like he's, gearing up his men. Like I said, I'd run through a wall for this guy. But like this entire army is acknowledging, like, yeah, we're gonna die right now. Like this is it. Like they don't think they're gonna win. They just think they're gonna do what's right, go to war, and they'll see what they can do. I don't know. And the entire, I don't need to talk up the Ride of the Rohirrim because that scene is one of the best scenes in all of The Return of the King. But I would say the actor who plays Theoden is probably my
I'm
pick.
imagining you in Iraq and you're under fire and you're trying to back to the hot spot.
Hold on.
Taylor, what are you doing?
I'm putting
There's
in my
fire,
earbuds.
gunfire everywhere.
Max
What's the hotspot? What's the
stands up,
password?
right now, and everyone's like, "What?"
Shields will be
when you said-
splintered. What are you using right now?
When you said you had to look up his name, I thought you were going to do the guy from The Charge of the Rohirrim that's in the front riding the horse. His facial expression, his intensity.
The guy who runs
I
a little
love
bit faster than all the rest.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know who
he's
you're talking
awesome.
about. Yeah.
That's
guy's
a
ready. He's ready to
behind
die.
the scenes fact also from Lord of the Rings that like Peter Jackson only allowed the extras that had read the books to be in the front of the Ride of the Rohirrim
That's
because they
hilarious.
understood the intensity more than anyone else, despite however well he could portray it. And it's like a lot of times I hear behind the scenes stuff, especially when it pertains to acting. I sometimes think it's like embarrassing. Like you're an actor, just act like it. You shouldn't have to like actually have to be so like have this performance coerced out of you from the director. It seems at times, but that time it seemed to work out.
I like watching the
Do you
videos.
guys know that
Of
Ian McKellen was wearing a watch during one of the scenes?
no, it's
I've seen
visible?
that picture. I look for it whenever I watch the movie.
Oh, what? I thought that was gonna be a. I thought that was sorry. I thought I was expecting a more of a jump on me, like we do when we talk about Star Wars.
No, I've actually never heard that one before. It's not like you're talking
You
about
guys did not
Aragorn
take the
breaking
bait,
his
all right.
toe.
Yeah, I've
Damn
seen,
it! Why did I? That's the one we always mention. Why did I not say that one?
I've seen that still image of him wearing the watch, but I look for it whenever I watch the movie. But it's
He's a wizard. He
during
can
a-
do whatever he wants.
It's
you know?
during a battle scene, so look for it in that scene because that's so helpful. Gollum. We gotta talk about Gollum. He is, well, he's the only thing that I think makes The Hobbit really good. The first Hobbit movie. Not just that I like that scene in Unexpected Journey with Gollum, like the story and writing of it, but when I watched Lord of the Rings just this past time and I watched Unexpected Journey, the CG on Gollum has been so well praised and deservedly so. It was revolutionary, and Andy Serkis's performance, all that is great, and the mocap work, they completely redid what was possible. But even just 10 years further than that, from how well praised Gollum was in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he looks so much better in The Hobbit, and that I never see that get talked about. Like it's night and day watching one and then the other. He looks amazing in The Hobbit.
He's just one of those characters to me that also goes a long way, which is why I think he works so well in Unexpected Journey. But obviously he's so integral to the story of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, you couldn't.
So it's a
much.
really
You couldn't
dicey
do it with
situation.
less of him. That's why I have my Snoke toy up behind me. This is obviously our first virtual episode, and so I set up my shelves back there, and I rotated my desk, which is why my ukulele is right in the middle because I was not expecting this to be my backdrop for the podcast. But now that it is, I hung up some shelves, and I'm gonna have more toys there in the future, hopefully pertaining to whatever our episode's about. So today I have my Lord of the Rings toys, but I don't have Lord of the Rings toys. So I have Snoke for the Andy Serkis angle, and Count Dooku for the Christopher Lee angle, and I have a Magneto toy for the Ian McKellen angle.
Topical. I appreciate it.
The lore of Lord of the Rings is something that I care surprisingly little about. For how much I am into the Star Wars lore, and I could go deeper and deeper and never get tired of it, even just like broad things, like Aragon's ring. I saw a TikTok about it just today, I think. And it's like, you know that Aragon's ring is like not even one of the rings of power, and it's way older, and it's older than the sun and the moon. And I'm like, oh my god, no, I don't really care. I don't want to hear that story. And Lord of the Rings has so much like deeper lore about that. And Rings of Power is getting into it now, and I hear that show is pretty good. So maybe I'll get into it with that. But even like the semantics about how they forged the Rings of Power and all that, and how Sauron rose to power. Like if they make a good show about it, I'll watch it. But I'm not really interested in hearing about that like I am all the Star Wars stuff. Like I would be so fascinated to see about ancient Sith and how, you know, the Coruscant Jedi Temple was built on the Sith Temple and all the lore stuff like that. But Lord of the Rings, I don't know, just never really did it for me.
The Rings of Power
1000%
is, in my
agree.
opinion, fine. I don't have any strong feelings about it really one way or another, but I do kind of agree with you on the lore. I always appreciate that it's there, and I appreciate that clearly Peter Jackson did his research and like kind of included everything very well. Because like when I do see those videos that you described, I'm always like, oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. But yeah, I agree. I don't read the books for I'm not invested in this universe like I am in Star Wars for some reason.
It's a hard thing, I think, to have people jump in. And we're obviously big fans of Star Wars, and you can latch onto something. I feel like we always have like that main fandom that we have, and then like there's other subcategories of fandoms that we have. Like I really like Star Trek, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't really dive into it like I do with Star Wars. I can't tell you why. Like,
Have you
in
watched all
comparison
the
to why
original
it's Star-
shows? Have you watched Star Trek: The Original Series and Next Gen? I hear those are the
The
two
original-
main ones.
Yeah, I mean the original series, yes, and then Next Generation is my favorite, and I've dabbled just like growing up with Deep Space Nine, and whatnot, and so, but I mean Next Gen is legitimately so good, and I encourage everyone to watch it too. But like I have no interest really in deeper lore,
Hmm.
But I mean Star Wars I can talk about all day.
Is the Star Trek lore on a comparable level to Star Wars lore or Lord of the Rings lore? Like it's
It's
a
just
good
so different
universe,
because-
but is it as deep? I guess I don't know if that's the right word, but like
I
the
think
lore
it-
of Star Wars and the lore of Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
are so expansive and
Yeah, it's
I don't know. Is Star
I don't-
Trek like
I mean,
that?
it's a little bit. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I feel like I don't have as much knowledge as somebody else. But I mean, like the thing with Star Trek, I think, is it's always evolving and always moving. They're going to different planets all the time, and so there's so many different things consistently there. I mean, you can go and talk about like Federation stuff and different planets and like Vulcan and everything. But I think like I'm sure there is, and I'm sure that's a lot more high level. But I feel like I would say no in comparison to Star Wars, just because I'm thinking of all the different ships and stuff too, and I feel like Star Trek doesn't have necessarily that. It's more like ideology, I'd say maybe.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm just not involved in that space as much as Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, but it's like a common meme that you hear people all the time, like when you're watching Star Wars, and they're like, "Did you know that that character in the background was involved with this thing and with that character at this
Yeah.
time?" And you can do that with Lord of the Rings also, and I just can't picture anyone saying that with Star Trek. But maybe I just haven't met anyone like that yet.
Well, I guess it's also just like basically there's like, hey, here are these like 15 people on this one ship for the show, and so it's a really and then all of the shows take place in different time periods, so it's
Mhm.
probably a little harder in that regard. But I'm sure if you read the books and stuff. Anyway, back to Lord of the Rings though.
Yeah. Max, is there? You said you had some segments you wanted to bring forward.
Yes. So I need to artificially boost our social media engagement. So I thought we could do a quick blind ranking. So Luke,
Perfect.
I want you to blind rank these epic Lord of the Ring moments, starting with the from 1 to 5. Blind rank
Okay.
from 1 to 5. Starting with the slow motion shot of the Fellowship walking past that rock.
Oh,
That rock.
I know what Rocky's talking
You're song
about.
off with a banger.
Everyone does.
I
It's
know.
not to be
I feel
slept
like
on.
because we already talked about Aragon opening the door, it's got to be in here. So I got to save room at the top for that. So I'll put this one at number 3.
All right, and then Boromir's death.
I'll put that at number 1.
Luke.
If I'm wrong, I'll be comfortable with
Whoa.
that being at number 1. That's so epic.
It is.
And then
It is.
Pippin singing while Faramir's army is dying.
Ooh,
Faramir.
that's a great scene, but I'm comfortable putting that at 5 because I wouldn't categorize it as epic. It's amazing and I love it, but yeah,
And
it's
you
more.
like
It's
singing.
I
more.
thought you were gonna say because of
melan-
the tomato juice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a horror movie. A couple cuts.
And then Legolas surfing down steps on a shield while shooting his bow and arrow.
That's epic. That's number 2. Yeah, no notes.
And then Ride of the Rohirrim.
Oh man, that's got to be number 1. So that was what? No, I'm at number 4.
Yeah.
I wasted the Fellowship walking across that rock at number 3. I thought if we were doing like movies, that would be in the higher tier. I should have known that that wouldn't be the top 3 for Lord of the Rings.
I think you were right though to not sleep on it. That's a great shot. There's been a lot of memes made about that, about how they went to
Howard Shore.
Howard Shore, thank you. And they were like, hey, it's just a shot of this Fellowship walking past a rock. You don't need to go that hard or anything.
Yeah, just 9 men and a pony. Nothing special.
Right. All
Walking
right.
past that rock.
And then do you want me to go into my next segment as well?
Let's do it.
So let me go back and pull it up.
We have access to our computers now, folks. It's a
I
whole
know,
new ball
This is
game.
exciting.
We do. We also are getting used to everything, so bear with us as my phone stopped recording for 5 minutes.
So this segment is called Fun Facts with Max. And I wanted to do this because, you know,
Nice.
we always joke about that scene where Aragorn kicks the helmet and he breaks his toe in real life and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, yeah, everyone knows that. So I did some digging to find some interesting fun facts that people might not know. It was supposed to be 10, but I actually found 11. So here is 11 fun facts about the Lord of the Rings that you might not know. Number 1, J.R.R. Tolkien originally wanted to rename the character of Gimli to Giblet. Number 2, the movies utilized a filming technique known as forced perspective, in which the audience is forced to view the members of the Fellowship as the good guys, even though it's about a group of marauders who steal from an elderly man and then attempt to destroy the evidence. Number 3, Peter Jackson couldn't use actual hobbits, so instead he used regular-sized humans and shrunk them using the same technology as Rick Moranis in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I was wondering when we're getting off the rails more and more.
Number-
I am. You'll have to edit it in. I was hoping I could do it myself in OBS, but I would like to display on my screen right now 11 exclamation point question mark.
Number 4, The Two Towers, which was released in 2002, was originally supposed to be titled Folia de.
So dumb.
Number 5, Jerry Seinfeld was originally cast as Aragorn and filmed multiple scenes, but eventually backed out to begin writing the B movie.
Which would come in 2007. So
He got to work early
really
on that.
had a-
Yeah, he had a.
yeah,
It
really,
went
yeah.
through several years of rewrites, if I'm not mistaken.
Number 6, none of the horses are real. They are all CGI and puppets. Number
Thanks to the Jim Henson Company, I believe, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Number 7, Andy Serkis's performance of Gollum was loosely based on Nancy Pelosi. Number 8, The Two Towers, which was released in 2002, was originally titled Two Lords, Two of the Rings, but changed titles after Tyrese Gibson allegedly threatened Peter Jackson, saying, "Y'all don't want this smoke." Number 9, Alec Baldwin was originally cast as Legolas, but dropped out after shooting the cinematographer in the face with a bow and arrow.
Oh no! Oh yeah.
Maybe it'll just be.
Maybe
10
we
fun
should just say
facts.
10 and cut that one.
When filming his death scene, Peter Jackson asked Christopher Lee if he knows the sounds a person makes when he dies, to which Christopher Lee stated, "In the Bible, it says what goes around comes around. Homo shot me. 3 weeks later, he got shot down. Now it's clear to me that I'm here for a real reason, because he got hit like I got hit, but he ain't fucking breathing." And this later inspired the 50 Cent song Many Men. And number 11, The Two Towers, which was released in 2002, was originally titled Mordor Strikes Back.
Star Wars angle.
Brought it all back.
I
But there
kept
you go.
waiting
There's
for the
10 fun
9/11
facts
joke
for you.
because
That's a.
the
I
Two Towers
was every
released
single.
in 2002. Was that a problem for either of you guys? I didn't talk about this on the podcast, right? How growing up, I never knew when I was young. So I was born in 97, so I was 4 during 9/11 and then 5 when the Two Towers came out. And I didn't know the difference title-wise between the Two Towers and the Twin Towers. Like I would call the 9/11 attack on the Two Towers, which works. You can get away with it going that way. But then I would call Lord of the Rings and the Twin Towers, and everyone would be like, "Oh, that's stupid." I remember this one
No,
time I
it's
even asked, like, "Why do they call them
hard.
the Twin Towers?" And our family friend, who was a couple years older, was like, he was annoyed with me because it's such a dumb question if you just hear it. And he's like, "Because they're two towers and they look exactly alike." And he was like upset that I asked him, and I was like, I mean, Mordor and Isengard, they're similar, but I don't know about exactly, but okay. But I remember that being a problem more than once growing up.
I feel like that's a classic case of DKB, which is dumb kid brain, which is when you just like are at such a like pivotal point of like learning that like those things just mesh together. Like there's so many things like that, and that is definitely one of them for me too. When I was a kid, I was like, wait, which one is which?
Yeah. To this
And
day,
I was born
I
4 years
cannot-
prior to that.
I cannot mourn 9/11 without getting a little pumped about the Lord of the Rings and the Two Towers.
Or a little sad when you watch Two Towers.
Yeah.
It's a real Ahsoka Taco Bell situation, or Burger King, whatever we had.
We had Burger King because,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, it
I'll
was
never
definitely a
forget that.
conversation that Peter Jackson had to have had with his producers, right? But the book, The Two Towers, came out well before 9/11, so
I know.
they were
Yeah,
kind of
they had to
they
have,
were kind of
talked
stuck.
about it.
They were like, "So, are we good?"
Which I think is the inspiration for the attacks, was just to coincide those.
Yeah, in the books, the Fellowship rode eagles into the towers.
Oh. So they did change. I'm glad you talked about that. Talked about loosely. Peter Jackson talking with Christopher Lee about what it's like to get stabbed in the back, because that is a good example of bad acting in my mind. And it reminds me of Star Wars. So there's a Star Wars connection. But the story is like Peter Jackson was directing Christopher Lee, like, okay, Greenman Wormtongue is gonna stab you in the back, and then you kind of like shout. And Christopher Lee was like, "Oh no, I was in the war. I know what it's like when someone gets stabbed in the back. You exhale because the breath like it escapes out of you, and that's not as fun." Like that scene,
No.
he should cry out. If it's factually and like realistically wrong, I'm okay with that. And it's like the battle on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, when the Previs people or whoever in post production was working on the lava flowing rivers, and they showed it to George Lucas, and he was like, "Oh, I want it to flow faster." And they said, "Yeah, but lava's really viscous, and so it only goes this fast, really." And George Lucas was like, "No, fuck that. Go make it go faster. It would look cooler." And that's what Peter Jackson should have said. Like, I get Christopher Lee was an intimidating man, and he's talking about stabbing people in the back. Like, I would probably nod along and tell him to do whatever he wants also. But I don't like that scene.
This is Luke,
Christopher
we
Lee
just recently
also
talked about
very
this,
much-
why sometimes it's better to be unrealistic, because realism sometimes just isn't that fun. So it's like, yeah, I understand that was a more realistic death. I think it should be over dramatic. It's the same thing with dialogue too. There's a reason that so much dialogue in TV, it's not real, and it doesn't sound real because people don't talk like that in real life. If you just put out a recorder and just recorded someone's conversation, it's not going to be as eloquent as what you see in any sort of movie. And that's why, for the life of me, I don't understand the praise of the one director, Matt, you're going to have to tell me his name, who did that divorce movie with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson.
Noah Baumbach.
Noah Baumbach, because he got so much praise in that movie and like all of his other movies too about his dialogue. Like his writing is always like very realistic writing or something like that. And it's weird. Like people are talking over each other, like you can't follow it. I don't know.
Not a fan.
I don't like that
I was
movie.
gonna say-
I can attest to the Marriage Story.
Why? Because
Yeah, Marriage
Kylo
Story
Ren's
is
sad.
Yeah, it was sad as hell.
I was gonna say Christopher Lee is also, he does that a lot. I feel like when he plays Dracula in like the 70s is when because he gets stabbed left and right. I feel like in those movies, and so I feel like he does exhale. Which also I think, I'm sure you guys know this as well, but it's fun to go back and watch. But Peter Cushing is mostly known for, besides to us Tarkin, he is Van Helsing. That was like his claim to fame, and Christopher Lee is Dracula, which is always fun to see those two act with each other and be like, oh, those are two Star Wars alum.
Was Van Helsing a particularly popular movie in the 1900s?
He's not.
1900.
I mean, he's yeah, I would say he's a character within those movies. He's not like, it's not a Van Helsing movie. He's just always Van Helsing in different movies.
Huh. So there's not a vet. Interesting. I did not know that, and I know very little about that now. Still, yeah, I do want to look more into that. Last thing I wanted to talk about is The Hobbit, which it caught a few stray bullets during this conversation already, but I think it gets very misfairly hated on because it is obviously compared to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is one of the most perfect movie trilogies by anyone's standard.
Yeah.
It's my favorite movie trilogy of all time. I mean, favorite. I think it's the most well-made movie trilogy of all time by a considerable margin. And then you're comparing what is literally the peak of cinema to anything else, it's going to pale in comparison. The Hobbit movies are not terrible, but they're so much worse that it gets so misfairly treated.
It is. I mean, I think they also, it feels like one of those things where, I could be wrong, but it feels like something like with Todd Phillips with Joker 2, or Rob Zombie with Halloween 2, I feel like they were like, we were going to make the Hobbit movies, Peter Jackson, do you want to do them? And if you don't, we're going to get someone else to do them. I feel like Peter Jackson was like, I'm not letting anybody touch those movies besides me, but I don't want to work nearly as hard because it's 20 years later or 10 years later. And so I feel like he wanted to make them quicker, obviously, right? I mean, there's more technology, they're pushing boundaries, but I also feel like I mean, when you go through that intense of a shoot and basically dedicate your life, I feel like, just for like a decade, like I just don't think he was like, I want to do the same thing. So he's like, what's the easier way out? Which, in that regard, I give him a lot of respect, and I don't think the movies would be that much better with if he made it the same way. To be honest, I think Martin Freeman is great in as Bilbo Baggins, though.
I think it would be that much better because like the only things that really bother me about those movies are the big fight scenes that look so much
Yeah,
worse than Lord of the
gobbledygook.
Rings. Yeah, that is a good
Huh.
example of gobbledygook, especially in the Battle of the Five Armies. Especially with I forget the character's name, Thorin's cousin, who shows up and he's like the leader of one of the armies, even though there's barely five. But the guy
Yes.
that rides a boar, the dwarf, I don't know if it's a VFX thing creating him digitally or if it's the 48 frames per second or what hair and makeup. That character looks horrible, and I have no idea why. Like it's probably realistically a combination of all three of those things, but I
Yeah.
cannot. I wish I could explain more clearly how much or why I hate that character so much, and it's just the look of him. He looks terrible.
I think it's also just like content wise though. I mean, like even if they made it practical and everything too, I'm just like I just don't see the worth in it. Like I like the like again, oh my god, Unexpected Journey, I think is a really quality movie. It's got a beginning, middle, and end, and then I feel like Desolation of Smog and Battle of the Five Armies just mushed together so much. Like to me, Matrix Reloaded and Matrix,
Revolutions.
I don't know, Revolutions, or like to me are like the
Revolution.
same movie, and I'm like I just like to me they're the same exact movie and they just blend together because they're just kind of both convoluted, and that's how I feel about both of those movies. Like Distillation of Smog has its moments. I think that's really cool. Battle of the Five Armies just feels like a like right, and we all know that it just feels like a tack on of the conclusion of the second movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I don't know, Max, what do you think? You've been quiet during the Hobbit movies.
I
Have you
don't have
not
a whole
watched
lot to
them?
say about the Hobbit movies. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they needed to be a trilogy. I mean, the Hobbit book is one
Yeah,
book. I mean, the Lord of the Rings trilogy
yeah,
is an actual
it's a kids
trilogy,
book.
so it like makes
Yeah, they
sense.
definitely could have done it in one movie. I mean, the extra stuff that they added to make it into a trilogy, I don't dislike. From what I understand, Toriel, the girl elf, Evangeline Lilly's character, is
Hmm.
unique to the books, and like Legolas wasn't in the or unique to the movies, and Legolas wasn't in that book. But I like those parts. Those are some of my favorite parts in the Hobbit movies. So I'm not upset that we got them. But and there's a lot of other stuff I like. I like Thorin's entire arc, and I like Bilbo's entire arc, and Gandalf is great in it. The honestly my least favorite part, with the exception of that boar rider guy, is all of the wizard stuff with the necromancer. Like we know where that's going. I don't need to see any of this. I know Sauron. I know he comes back. I know the Witch King of Angmar is the one who had that blade, and Saruman is like, "Oh, we don't know that that's what it is. Maybe it's something else." And it's like, please skip this part.
I think that's exactly Max's theory with the show. Is like we know all of this. Why are you telling me things I don't need to? You can't fake me out. Like I know that where this is going.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the show, so it's hard for me to defend just Max's take when I have no other knowledge. But I assume the show also has character arcs and things and other story beats that are intriguing and interesting to watch. Those parts of the Hobbit movies was literally just that. It's like
Hmm.
it's just telling us that Sauron is coming back, and we don't need to see that. I don't know. I do want to watch Rings of Power when I find time. I think I'll like it quite a bit.
There are a lot of good characters in the Rings of Power. Celebrimbor is more in the second season than in the first one, but he's one of my favorite ones. And Prince Durin, the dwarf, he's good, and Elrond, I like him too.
Elrond Hoyabembe.
There's one elf who keeps making an appearance who I don't like, especially in the second season, because he was just Deus Ex Machina. Like every single time someone was about to die, like the person would just get shot by a bow and arrow, and it would always be the same elf, and it's like, oh, good, he's here again. That guy's the only one that I would say I don't like.
Um, I I realize it's rude to be on my phone. I'm pulling up my force for thought. Unless someone else has one. Anyone have any force for thought to leave us with this week? I do.
Take us
Perfect.
away. Oh, there you go.
It's not Lord of the Rings themed. It is Star Wars themed, which I think it's important that we keep our head on straight and we know what we're all about. As Grand Master, Yoda sits third to the end in that chamber. They sit in a semicircle with Yoda on the end. I get, like, production-wise, why it was made as a movie so that you can see some Jedi in the background when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are facing Yoda and Mace Windu. And if they were in the middle of the semicircle, then you just see the door, which is worse as like a set design thing. So I get that, but that does not excuse the lore implications that still need to be retconned, resolved, what have you, in my mind on why Yoda likes to sit on that end. Is it just to
perfect.
exclude the other people? Like they
No.
barely talk it higher than a whisper. Surely there are times when
It's
Jarl Poof can't hear what Yoda and Mace Windu are saying.
who's in his spot, who at like the head of the table, like in this scenario, you know?
I think
In
it's
the center.
Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Yeah. Is
no,
it Ki-Adi-Mundi?
I don't want to recreate the entire council from memory, but it's like on the end is Plo Koon, and then is it Yoda right away, and then Mace Windu, and then Ki-Adi-Mundi, or is it Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Yoda, Mace Windu? I have my computer right here. I can pull it up. But what were you gonna say?
Yeah, if it helps, I think that this is the best boss move. Is that if you get attacked, they're gonna go for the head of the table, right? So don't sit at the head of the table. It's a smart power move.
It is
Yoda's
Plo
smart.
Koon, Mace Windu, Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and then CC 10 Yaddle. So I guess Yaddle
Yaddle.
is at the center. Which good for her.
Exactly.
Put some respect on her
The
name.
No, it's the same thing. It's literally Padme. Yoda's literally like, this sucker looks just like me. If someone
No.
bursts in, they're gonna yes.
That's not
Yoda
it.
might be a bit of a dick. He's sacrificing Yaddle for sure.
I don't know about that. But I like to think it was at least a conversation. Do you think maybe Yoda was in that seat before he became Grand Master, and then he got elected to Grand Master, and it's not like a ceremonial moving to the throne because it's not like a kingship, but Grand Master is definitely a unique title. He is definitely a step above everyone else.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think that was just the seat that was available at the time, so he moved into that one, and they've just been there ever since. I don't know.
Like how when we watched Ahsoka, I didn't have it back the entire time and I refused to move. Same thing.
You get complacent.
Exactly, yeah. You don't want to move. It's like when you sit in class in high school.
The
It's
first
my seat.
Yeah, like in college it happened to me a lot. Like the first seat you happen to sit in the first day of the semester happens to be the seat that you'll sit in for the rest of the entire semester.
And then like if somebody
that
else
makes
joins
sense.
the
I'm
class and
comfortable with
takes that seat, then you have to like get there before that person does to show your dominance. Like, no, this is where I sit usually. Just because you're new here.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to our ramblings on Lord of the Rings. We promise next week to bring you more Star Wars content, and follow us on social media. And thanks for watching.
I think Max is paused. See you, Sammy.
.54 minutes. That's a good length.